All right, well, welcome everyone to the August 25th Planning Commission meeting for the City of Edina. So I am Commissioner Agnew, Vice Chair Agnew, and Chair Nemerov is attending virtually today. And due to the efficiency of chairing in person, he asked me that I serve as chair for today's meeting. So I will be chairing, and Chair Nemerov is joining as a participant virtually tonight. Through this month, so we're still in August, public officials can participate in public meetings virtually for up to 3 meetings if they have medical concerns for themselves or for family members. We are using WebEx to connect those of us in the room to remote participants. So before we begin, there are a few things that I'd like to cover for helping everyone to participate in portions of the meeting. The city is committed to continuing to receive and hear your input on matters. We've been collecting public input through voicemail and through our engagement website, bettertogetheredina.org. It's important that you know that all comments that have been submitted have been received and read prior to the start of this meeting. You do not need to submit the same feedback in another way. All feedback is considered equally, regardless of the way in which it was submitted. Tonight, we have 2 public hearings, and individuals who would like to provide public testimony remotely for a public hearing can do so by calling 1-800-374-0221 and enter conference ID 3155067. Individuals in the room will be invited to come forward first to speak to the commission. Then we will ask to hear from you who have dialed in. Everyone is allowed up to 3 minutes to speak. After giving your full name and address, the green light on the podium will turn on. When you have 30 seconds remaining, the yellow light will turn on, and when you are out of time, the red light will turn on. Staff will let anyone who calls in know if they go over the 3 minutes. Remember, you do not need to call in or comment live tonight if you've already provided feedback. Also, do not repeat any information that has already been presented. Provide testimony if you have new comments or information to bring forward. Thank you in advance for your patience as we work to conduct this hybrid meeting. We hope there will not be any issues, but please know that we will do our best to continue the meeting as best we can if there are glitches. And so with that, I will call tonight's meeting to order, and we will start with a roll call.
Thank you. Member Miranda?
Here.
Member Berube?
Here.
Member Elkery?
Here.
Member Strauss?
Here.
Member Olson?
Here.
Member Nemerov?
Here.
Chair Agnew?
Here. Thank you. All right, so first on the agenda is the approval of our meeting agenda.
Move to approve.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Member Miranda?
Aye.
Member Berube?
Aye.
Member Elkery?
Aye.
Member Strauss?
Aye.
Member Olson? Member
Aye.
Nemerov?
Aye.
Chair Agnew?
Aye. And with that, the agenda passes. Next is the approval of meeting minutes from our August 11th meeting. Any discussion on that?
I move to approve the minutes as submitted.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Member Miranda?
Aye.
Member Berube?
Aye.
Member Elkery?
Aye.
Member Strauss?
Aye.
Member Olson?
Aye.
Member Nemerov?
Aye.
Chair Agnew?
Aye. All right, so the was the approval of the meeting minutes from our August 11th meeting. Next up is community comment, which is something that we are doing now that we are back here in person. So we invite those of our community, our residents, to share relevant issues or concerns. And again, here individuals must limit their comments to 3 minutes. Is there anyone here tonight to provide public comment? please. Please begin by stating your name and address, and then you'll have 3 minutes, and I'm sure you know the colors of the light.
Because I look at you when I'm talking to you. I'm not looking down here. So if you could give me a 1-minute warning, that'd be great. Okay. Janie Weston, 6136 Brookview Avenue, Edina. And I'm happy to see everyone's wearing masks tonight. Good going. Okay, I'm here to comment about a construction project going up in my neighborhood, what's now been dubbed the View 44 apartments, luxury apartments in the 4400 block of Valley View Road. So just east of Wooddale Avenue on the south side of Valley View Road. I live only a block and a half away from there. I'm regularly walking, biking, driving by, and I have some comments. The front setback of this building, now that the foundation block is completely in, is 16 feet from the street curb. This is extremely close to the street. I've measured it, that's what it is. There's a 2 to 3 foot gap forward from that, so they can build the block wall. And forward of that are 1 foot wide I-beams pounded in to retain the soil so that they don't slough off during construction. The problem with the building being approved to be that close to the street is the street becomes the staging area. Equipment, enormous trucks, full 53-foot plus long flatbed trucks, they have to use the street. The construction manager has no choice. There's no place else to stage cement trucks. The crane that got brought in there last week, it makes it impossible to do the staging on the lot. Because of that, it makes the street very unsafe. If it's still open for 2 out of the 3 lanes, the center is a turning lane. The sidewalk is hazardous. The street is going to be closed completely, the whole block, beginning September 7th, as 20-foot I-beams are being hoisted into place with a crane. When that happens, the city buses have to go up my street 2 blocks away. This is a problem. If a builder or architect says, I'm not going to bother you with the gory details of the basement level of a building, start asking questions, because I believe that's what happened here. You were not, the City Council and Planning Commission was not paying enough attention to the details of this building and considering what happens during the construction process. When it starts blocking a main thoroughfare street like Valley View Road constantly, it becomes a problem. The street is not supposed to be the staging area for construction.
Thank you.
I'm not blaming it on the construction manager. He has no choice. Please consider the process before you approve plans for future projects like this.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Was there anyone else in the audience tonight? Okay, thank you. That concludes our community comment portion of tonight's agenda. Next on the agenda is our public hearings. We will start with a variance request for a new home at 4230 Crocker Avenue South.
Chair, members of the Planning Commission, the subject property is located at 4230 Crocker Avenue South. The request is for a 3.75-foot first floor elevation variance for a new home. The existing home, as highlighted, is a one-story home with an attached garage. It's located on the west side of Crocker Avenue. This is a survey of the existing home, and you'll notice that the finished floor elevation is at 879.4. The new home, which is proposed roughly in the same location, will be built to meet all of the ordinance standards with one exception. They are requesting an increase in height for the first floor. First floor height can be increased by 1 foot, and they're requesting a 3.75-foot first floor height variance. So essentially it will be 4.75 feet higher than the existing first floor, and that is due to the fact that it is within an area of localized flooding. There have been other projects within the neighborhood that have had to be elevated based on similar conditions. So this is the basement floor plan, first floor floor plan, second floor floor plan, and then cross-section showing that the basement ceilings are approximately 8 feet, so the basement ceiling height isn't, out of the ordinary in terms of overall height. The design of the house actually originally had a higher pitched roof. They've had to flatten that out considerably because they are maintaining that maximum 30-foot height from the existing grade and not asking for a variance for overall height. So this is the front elevation of the house, rear elevation, and the 2 side elevations, and then the new home in context. The flood elevation of the subject property is at 872.7, so they have to raise that basement elevation 2 feet above the floodplain elevation at 874.7. The local flooding issue is also in the front yard area, so they have had to make sure that the garage opening is also elevated to 878.4. The house meets all of the ordinance standards with the exception of that first floor elevation, and it's really been driven by the fact that they have to raise the basement elevation. So the primary issues and staff recommendation: is it a reasonable use? Practical difficulty caused on the property is the floodplain elevation and the basement elevation requirement. The applicant has designed and proposed the home where it will comply by being slightly under the overall height requirement, even given the fact that it has to be measured from existing grade. It will be under 30 feet. The increase in first floor elevation will allow for an 8-foot standard basement ceiling, which is not unreasonably tall. That's actually a little bit lower than what you currently see in most new homes. And it is the goal of the city to remove properties from the flood zone and promote designs that protect properties from anticipated increases in flood events. So it's the goal of the city to try to elevate when we have the opportunity to do that. Are there circumstances that are unique to this particular property? The variance allows for the new home basement to be placed out of the flood zone. There's not a FEMA flood elevation requirement or localized flooding for all properties in the zoning district, but in this particular area, this property is affected by that. Will the variance alter the essential character of the neighborhood? The proposed home design reflects the character of the neighborhood given the fact that it meets the height, scale, and mass by the zoning ordinance. Staff does recommend approve the 3.75-foot first floor height variance for the proposed new home. Approval should be based on the plans presented and also the engineering memo. There have been a few comments on Better Together Edina. All have been positive. And we also have Ross Bintner, the engineering services manager, present if you have any questions about the localized flooding. And with that, I will stop and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
This is Joanne. I have a quick question.
Go ahead, Joanne.
So Chris, with the concept of the elevation that shows the other homes on either side, are those homes in the floodplain?
I believe they are also affected by localized flooding, but I think Ross could probably address that better than I.
Hello, Chair and Commission members. My name is Ross Bittner. I'm the Engineering Services Manager with the city. To the Commission members' question, I didn't prepare ahead of time and look at the property to the north of this one. To the north of this one, but I noted the one to the south is affected by the same landlocked basin. The grade starts to increase going north, so I'd have to look closer at that one to answer for sure.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Chair Nemerov, do you have any questions? Okay, thank you. Commissioner Elkire, did you have one?
Yes, I did. I just need to scroll back up to the compliance table. I might be getting my terms confused here, but on the compliance table, it says the first floor elevation of the existing house is 896.95, which seems to be considerably higher rather than lower. So what?
The compliance table was changed. That's
Okay.
incorrect, sorry.
All right, sorry.
If you were to look at a more recent Novus agenda, the existing house is at 879.4. So the maximum first floor elevation is 888.4. The first floor elevation that they are proposing is 884.15. The low floor flood protection elevation is at 874.7.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other questions, did the applicant want to add anything?
I don't think so. I think you guys covered it very well. Just like to say that this is the homeowners that own this lot. It's not a builder pushing this to go through. They picked out this lot because they like the neighborhood. They have a family that they want to raise at this property, and we've been working hard to try to get it in compliance and in line with the fitting of the neighborhood. So that's kind of all I have to add.
Thank you. All right, and given that this is a public hearing then, we will go to the public hearing portion of this. So again, to participate in the public hearing, one, you can step up to the podium if you're here in person. And once all those in person have contributed, we will answer those who have called in. So again, if you're participating remotely, the number to call is 1-800-374-0221 and enter conference ID 3155-067. Give the operator your name, street address, and telephone number. And then, this is the key part, press *1 on your telephone keypad when you would like to add your name to the queue to speak. So purely calling in will not add you to the queue. You do need to press *1. So with that, is there anyone here in person who would like to provide testimony on this public hearing matter? Please.
Hi, do you want my name again?
Yes, please.
Okay, Janie Weston, 6136 Brookview Avenue. I used to live 2 doors to the south of this house, and I know this backyard flooding situation intimately because back in 1988, we had at least 12 inches of rain, and within about 1 hour, and I saw what happens when the backyards flood. The backyard of the proposed house, that sure did flood too. The water was up to, if I went wading, about I don't know, 2.5 feet deep. So I understand exactly why they need to raise their basement elevation up. I do have a question, though, to be put to the builder, the people that want to build this house. It's a great neighborhood, by the way. I loved living there. The house that I lived in, we bought it from the original owners. They told us that the house had been put on 60 to 80-foot pilings. Once it flooded, and once I saw other issues that other homes in the area had as far as settling, because it used to be a marshy extension of Lake Calhoun. I was very thankful that we had 60 to 80-foot pilings under my house. The house that they'd like to build a new one for would have exactly the same good sense reasons of stability of the foundation to have 60 to 80-foot pilings put under their house too. So I'm just recommending you better make sure that you've got a really good piling base for your new construction. I'd be happy to talk with the builder and the future homeowners about issues that I observed and experienced with the new house. Great neighborhood. It does need to be higher for the basement level to be up out of the floodplain. There's a good reason to have more than a 1 foot higher threshold. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, this is Tim Bellin. Just thank you for your comment. And we have soil borings on the property, and obviously thanks for the comments. We'll do our due diligence on the engineering when we get into the project. So if it's approved. But thanks for your comments.
All right, I think we do not have anyone else here in person who would like to provide public testimony. Do we have anyone who has dialed in?
We do not have anyone who's dialed in.
All right, should we do our due diligence of giving it a full minute? All right. So again, if you have called in and you would like to participate, please press *1 on your telephone keypad. We'll give it 1 minute. All right, it looks like no one else has elected to provide testimony. Can we have a motion to close the public hearing?
I move to close the public hearing.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Miranda?
Aye.
Commissioner Berube?
Aye.
Commissioner Alkire?
Aye.
Commissioner Nemerov?
Aye.
Commissioner Strauss?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Chair Agnew?
Aye. All right, are there any more questions or any discussion? I welcome either right now. Please, Commissioner Strauss.
Yes, what struck me, and Chris brought it out in her presentation, is the commitment on the owner, the builder, to the overall height of the project, which I think would have been, they made every change and alteration that they could. So I commend their effort, to it, and the floodplain level. We come across this all the time, so I think it's a good project.
Commissioner Berube.
I also am influenced by the fact that they're not asking for any other variances, including the height. And in order to get the house out of the floodplain, I think this is what we need to do. So I have no problem with this.
All right, I do now have both Commissioner Olson and Commissioner Nemerov on video. So I will continue to look to the two of you to just raise your hand if you do have anything to add. All right. Seeing no other comments, I too am really influenced by the fact that I feel that 8 feet for that basement level is really standard, and I think that Chris even mentioned, it's shorter than some of the houses that we're seeing recently, and so I do see that they, did what they could to keep within it, and that we need to get it out of the floodplain. So I too am supportive of this.
I move to approve the variance for 4230 Crocker, subject to the findings in the staff report.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? All right, can I get a roll call, please?
Commissioner Miranda?
Aye.
Commissioner Berube?
Aye.
Commissioner Alkire?
Aye.
Commissioner Nemerov?
Aye.
Commissioner Strauss?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Chair Agnew?
Aye. All right, this variance has been approved, so thank you. I do also just want to call note that we have Commissioner Bennett has joined us online, so when we do roll call, we'll include him moving forward. Next up, we have a public hearing for a variance request for a front yard setback for a new home at 6716 Arrowhead Pass. And with that, I will pass it over to City Planner Emily.
Thank you. The subject property, 6716 Arrowhead Pass, is located on the north side of the intersection of Indian Hills Road and Arrowhead. The existing home is a split-level home that was built in 1956. The applicant is requesting an 81.4-foot variance from the 98.7-foot front yard setback requirement. The existing home currently does not meet the required setback. It has an existing non-conforming setback of 16.8 feet. The new home, as presented, has a setback of 17.3 feet. The subject property is one of 3 properties that is addressed off of Arrowhead Pass, so the required front yard setback is the average of the other 2 dwellings on that same street, and that average is 98.7. The property also has a second required front yard setback off of Indian Hills Road, and the proposed dwelling meets that required front yard setback. So with the exception of the front yard setback off of Arrowhead Pass, the proposed project meets all of the other zoning requirements. Staff believes that the variance criteria has been met in this instance. The proposed project complies with the zoning standards with the exception of one of the required front yard setbacks. The practical difficulty is caused by the existing placement of the 2 homes on Arrowhead Pass and the existing non-conforming setback of the existing home. The unique shaped lot and required setbacks greatly affect the buildable area. As you can see on the screen, the yellow area is the area that would be outside of all of the city's required setbacks on this lot. The circumstances are unique to the subject property and aren't self-created. The unique shape of the lot and limitations of those required setbacks are not similar to every similarly zoned property. The existing home has a non-conforming setback of 16.8 feet, and the applicant is proposing a 17.3-foot setback. Staff believes that granting the variance will not alter the character of the neighborhood. The proposed project complies with the other zoning requirements such as height, building coverage, and all the other setbacks. So with that, staff's recommendation tonight is to approve the 81.4-foot variance from the 98.7-foot front yard setback requirement for the new home at 6716 Arrowhead Pass, based on the findings and conditions listed in the staff report. And with that, I can answer any questions, and the applicant is here tonight to give a short presentation as well.
Thank you. Any questions for City Planner Boddicker? No? All right, then let's move into the applicant's presentation, please. Welcome to the Planning
Yeah,
Commission.
thank you guys so much. My name is Nate Pribble. I'm the owner of Allied Partners, and this is the project we've been working on here the last couple months. We've talked in depth with the neighbors, and as we keep reviewing this project, we kept trying to find a way to say, hey, how do we fit the neighborhood, but also make sure that we're able to build a structure here that everybody could be happy with. So in this, we had a meeting, I think it was almost 4 months ago, with the neighbors to kind of have that discussion originally up front, and then we also had another get together as we approach this variance process. As we build homes here, it's the biggest just to make sure we have neighborhood buy-in, because as you've heard tonight from some of the other people, that it's really important that everybody stays on the same page. A big thing here we saw with this lot and with this property is we wanted to make sure that it kind of fit in the natural hardscape of the property. It didn't stand out like a sore thumb, so we were using a lot of like earth-based materials, so like the siding is, you know, a wood-based siding and whatnot. I really wanted to fit the area. And the difficulty of being a corner lot is really the hard part of this whole deal, is because the corner lot setback, there's no way with the lake behind for the two neighbors that it's being judged against, because they're pushed back closer to the lake, which makes them have such a large front yard, where basically we have 2 front yards. So, I mean, I think your city planner did a great job here going through everything. That was kind of what, I didn't know the process. She was going to go through all that, so I thought that's what we're going to be presenting on here. So if there's any questions, though, I'd be happy to take any questions from anybody.
I do have one question. So you mentioned engaging with the neighbors, though I didn't see that we had any input from neighbors. So could you maybe just summarize what those interactions looked like and what their feedback was?
Yeah, we had a meeting. Pete, you might help me. How long? About 4 months ago, we had a meeting that we were talking about the project and just wanted to get input from the neighbors to say, hey, what does people think of this? Where are we at? And then we got really positive feedback. I mean, you know, one of the neighbors is actually here tonight. And then the neighbor right next door was actually the one that I've talked to the most. And I mean, he said, hey, when are you guys getting going? Let's get going on this. I can't wait to see what this is going to look like. You know, so I mean, it's been really positive there. I think the other challenge is the other neighbor on the other side uses that house only as a vacation home, so they're not there on a full-time basis, so they only come in and out. So.
Wonderful. All right, are there any other questions for the applicant before we go to the public hearing? All right, thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
All right, so again, we will start with those who are here in person. And if you would like to participate in the public hearing remotely, please dial in to 1-800-374-0221. Enter conference ID 3155067. Give the operator your name, street address, and telephone number. And then be sure to press *1 on your keypad to indicate that you would like to be added to the queue to speak. But first, I will give anyone here in person an opportunity to come and provide public testimony. Yes, please.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm a neighbor right across the street, actually, at 6715 Indian Hills Road.
And what was your name?
It's Eric Perkins. So I think it's going to affect the most, probably of ours, because it's the only house we actually see. So I think it's like 8 feet or something it's moving, but we're fine with everything on that. As far, because I think the house is like 300 feet away from ours anyway, so it doesn't, and the yard's really big in that area. And the builder did invite us over a few times. He had it all staked out and kind of show us where the driveway's going in and everything. So we all appreciate, you know, that he did that. And then he actually had a couple of the other neighbors invite us over to one of his other model homes in Edina that he had completed, so we can kind of see the materials and everything. So I think it's going to be a good project, and so I'm fine with it. That's all I've got.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anyone else here in person that would like to provide testimony? All right, seeing none, we will go to the call-in. Has anyone indicated that they would like to speak tonight?
We do not have any callers for this public hearing.
All right, I will give it a minute. Again, if you would like to provide public testimony, you can call in to 1-800-374-0221, conference ID 3155067, and then press star 1. And the reason that we give it a minute is because there is a delay for those who are watching in some of our online forums. So. All right, well, I used up most of that minute speaking, and no one has joined into the call. So I think we should close the public hearing.
To move to close the public hearing?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Member Miranda?
Aye.
Member Berube?
Aye.
Member Alkery?
Aye.
Member Nemerov? Member Strauss?
Aye.
Member Bennett?
Aye.
Member Olson?
Aye.
Chair Agnew?
Aye. Thank you. That closes the public hearing. So with that, would like to open it up to any other questions or comments at this time.
I guess I could start us off. I mean, it's a very, looking at the overhead maps that staff provided, it's a very unusual lot, very unusual collection of lots that surround it as well. And I imagine a very challenging situation for a builder. And if I'm thinking about this right, I mean, I honestly don't see any way, it might be even impossible to meet the front yard setback given the other two houses that are on that block. Also encouraged by the fact that the setback's not getting any larger than it was before. It's getting a little bit smaller. So, I mean, I guess I would just finish by acknowledging the difficulty of the technical challenge, and I think it's a good project.
Commissioner Brewery?
I would echo those comments from Commissioner Eichhorn. And then once again, influenced by you're not asking for any other variance. So it seems to make sense. It's an odd-shaped lot, as already mentioned. Also, it's still a pretty significant distance from the street. It's just that the other two, we have to take the average of the other two. So it is what it is, but I don't see any reason why we couldn't provide a variance for this.
Please.
Yeah, I concur. I mean, there's just nothing typical about this, and we've run into that. And anytime homes on cul-de-sacs and stuff like that, we see this. But my compliments to the builder and to the owner. You obviously did do your outreach, and it shows. I mean, we appreciate when we see that kind of commitment to working with the neighbors. Thank you.
All right, for those of you who are joining remotely and are not on video, please just interject if you have anything to add at this time. Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I move to approve the variance for 6716 Arrowhead Pass for the variance for the front yard setback as laid out in the staff memo and subject to the conditions and findings in the staff memo.
I second.
Roll call, please.
Member Miranda?
Aye.
Aye.
Member Alkery?
Aye.
Member Nemerov?
Aye.
Member Strauss?
Aye.
Member Bennett?
Aye.
Member Olson?
Aye.
Chair Agnew?
Aye. All right, so this variance has passed. Thank you very much for coming in tonight. Next on the agenda is reports and recommendations. And first we have the discussion about the zoning ordinance amendments And I think, Carrie, you're going to be talking about that.
I will. Thank you, Chair, members of the commission. So before you is a draft ordinance. It checks off a few items that we have on our work plan for this year, and one that staff has added as a kind of a clarification of code cleanup that we see as more administrative, but nonetheless it's needed. So that it deals with impervious surface, regulations for basements, the 1 foot rule, and setback definitions. So what I thought I would do is go through the ordinance, each section, and kind of summarize each. And then we would have some discussion on where it's at in terms of how it's drafted today. The idea behind this here is once the commission is somewhat comfortable with the draft, we would then post it on Better Together, set a public hearing for the Planning Commission to hold a public hearing to consider the ordinance. So this evening, just looking for some feedback and maybe talk about potential dates where we could tee this up. So the first section deals with definitions. So because this ordinance is establishing an impervious surface requirement, which we don't have today, we've defined it. The second set is set of definitions is in regards to how setbacks are calculated, how it's defined. Last year, some of you may recall that we amended the zoning ordinance to establish new setbacks within the Southdale district, or at least how we measure them. And it's an idea that came out of the design experience guidelines and the small area plan, or the district plan for Southdale. The idea is on France and York, there would be a 50-foot setback for all structures from the face of the building to the curb. Traditionally, we've measured setbacks to the lot line, but this was a new way to have more of a uniform setback from the street. All east-west streets other than York, or all other streets other than York and France, would have a 30-foot setback from the building, face of the building, to the curb. However, when we amended the ordinance, we didn't address the definitions of setback. So what this is just clarifying the definitions to include how we measure setbacks in the Southdale district. So that's an add-on. Sections 2 and 5, it clarifies building coverage, and it also establishes the impervious surface regulation that's established. So the building coverage is clarified to eliminate patios, recreational facilities like tennis courts, because those will now be regulated under the impervious surface requirement. And the proposed requirement is 50%. That was the recommendation of the Planning Commission Working Group, where Commissioners Strauss, Miranda, and Bennett participated, as well as staff. Ross Bittner is with us this evening to answer any questions that you may have in that regard. And he helped establish the definition and coming up with that 50% requirement. Sections 3 and 4, first, the code would be amended to eliminate the requirement to have a basement. This somewhat gets at the affordable housing for any new home. Currently, we require that a basement has to be built. So this would eliminate that requirement. So you could build a slab on grade type home, especially when, the next item addresses issues that have come up in regard to stormwater, floodplain, where we have to lift the home up in order to meet that 2-foot requirement above a floodplain or a high water elevation. The second is in regard to that 1-foot rule, where if you tear a house down, the new home can't be any taller than 1 foot above the first floor elevation of the previous home. So we've over the last 5 years, we've granted 23 variances to that standard. 20 of them dealt with that high water issue, where it's pretty much a given that we're going to grant a variance above that 1-foot rule to get the new home out of those low areas where it's impacted by a wetland or the high water table. There was correspondence that we did receive from a resident that we forwarded on to the Planning Commission for your consideration, and there were several good points addressed within that. And it has to do with, or at least the way to, well, first to talk about the concerns about grading, those types of things that were within the letter. A lot of that is covered with our new review process with our engineering department that Mr. Milner has established with his department. But secondly, the way the ordinance is drafted, areas outside of, an area that's located within a floodplain or a high water area would no longer be required to meet that 1 foot rule. So the way to address that, and this may be a good idea because most of our variances, again, have dealt with that high water table. We could amend the code so that the 1 foot rule wouldn't apply to properties that are only impacted by the wetland or a floodplain. And that way, any home outside of those areas would still need to comply with the 1 foot rule. So I throw that out there for the Planning Commission to consider. So that, those are the ordinances that are in front of you this evening. So I'll open it up for any discussion.
Thank you, Carrie. Can you just briefly speak to, before we start with questions, what your proposed process is, or is that part of what you want us to provide to you for next steps?
Yeah, so once we're generally, you could be comfortable, you could provide some direction for us to address that 1 foot rule, however you'd like to move forward on that. We could draft that up, bring it back for more discussion at the next meeting, and then post it on the website and set a public hearing. We're not really under any, rush to get this through. So it's really, whenever we were generally comfortable, we would post it on Better Together, probably set a public hearing for 30 days out from the time that we posted it. And from there, it would go to City Council 2 to 3 weeks after that.
Thank you. All right, I'll open it up for questions, comments.
I have sorry.
Commissioner Alkire, please.
This first one might be a little silly, but is it commonly understood what the difference between a patio and a deck are and how they're similar and different and what those words mean?
In terms of within the definition of the impervious surface?
The rules are different for a patio or a deck. And I'm not sure what the Venn diagram of those two looks like, or what's a patio and what's not, and what's a deck and what's not.
I'd have to think about that. I think we would want to regulate them similarly, although a deck, sometimes water can get through, where a patio, it can't.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have any preconceived notions about what it should or shouldn't be. It's one of the things that came to mind as I was reading through that. Are pool decks considered patios? Or are they counted in coverage measurements?
Like if there's decking around a pool?
Concrete apron deck.
Yeah, that would be included.
Okay, but the pool surface itself is not, because that's water.
Right.
Okay.
Hello, Chair. I have a question. I may have more, but I have a question about the 1 foot rule, if I could ask that.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so Planner Teague, thank you for the review of the correspondence. I agree that the issue here was only to deal with the 1 foot rule in the flood zones. So I agree with that change. But then I had another question, and that's with, so I agree with the change about not making this rule apply to houses outside the flood zones. We can deal with those if and when they come up. But within the flood zones, as it's drafted, it appears what we're doing is removing any height restriction on that first level. So then I'm concerned that somebody, if they wanted, could come in and say, well, I'm going to put my house 12 feet above the flood zone and then build, however many feet house they wish to build from that point, 30, 35, 40. And I'm just wondering if just removing the 1 foot rule as opposed to increasing the number I'm wondering if increasing the number might be a better solution than just leaving it open so people could just put whatever height they want if they're in the flood zone and then just build from there.
So I believe we could address that, when we make the changes to the code where we're, essentially it's on page 3, number 8, the A, B, C, the conditions that would have to exist in order for the 1 foot rule not to apply. We could put in some type of regulations within there that talk about the home can't be any taller than at least 2 or 3 feet above whatever that low water elevation is. So as they're not building something that's 5, 6 feet above the flood elevation. It's requiring them to go down as far as they can. I could work with engineering to come up with maybe an appropriate number in that regard.
But yes, we'd be changing the 1 foot rule to the appropriate number foot rule.
Yeah, it would have to be specific to whatever that flood elevation is, whether it's 2 or 3 feet. Maybe we want to allow an additional foot above the 2 feet that's required.
Commissioner Berube, did you have something to add on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. I mean, they'd still have to meet the height requirement or come and ask for a variance. So it's not like someone's going to build a 40-foot house just because they can do 10 feet higher.
Yes, so that's a good point. So the height requirement is not changing, and we measure height from existing grade, so they can't build up a false grade just in order to meet the height requirement. So that does stay the same.
And I think as drafted in our materials tonight, it does mention that it's because this ordinance conflicts with the city's requirements for the low floor elevation of new homes to be 2 feet above a flood elevation. So I think we could just rely on using that same language that's already there as 2 feet above.
Build in specific language that says you can't go over that, right?
Commissioner Miranda, you had a comment before.
No, Chair Nemeroff covered that. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Strauss.
Curious that eliminating basements, because we had a number of projects just for that reason that we're proposing not to do a basement, and there was really no sound reason to require the basements, right? I mean, in our review, it was sort of like, it was clear, maybe based on some old, understandings of what a basement did, but okay, yeah.
Right, yeah. No specific reason that I'm aware of as to why that was created.
Yeah, so we were just really clearing up something with no need. Yeah, thank you.
All right, just giving a moment for Commissioner Olson or Commissioner Bennett to interject as well.
I have no further comments or questions, thanks.
Same here, I'm good.
All right. Let's see, I had 2 questions. So for the setback definition, my understanding is that this only impacts the Southdale area. It's not an impact to broader Edina or anything for residential areas. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep.
Thank you. And then just logistically, would we be packaging all 4 of these together to be presented and open to community comment altogether?
We would, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we would post the draft just as it appears in your packet with the changes that we're talking about.
Okay. Has that been done before, where all, like, a bunch of things are packaged together? My only concern is potentially confusing people, or, you know, even just the idea of like, oh, there's 4 changes, and that might cause a lot of community dialogue about different things at different points in a public comment period. So just thinking about logistically, is that the effective approach? But if you've done it in the past, I'll trust your gut on that.
Yeah, this is the way we've done it in the past. Sometimes we've had less, you know, sometimes it's more narrow focused. Sometimes it's even more. In the past, we've done code cleanups where we need to just make some technical clarifications, and sometimes there's more than what appears in this ordinance.
Great. Commissioner Alkire.
I just want to, I'm still stuck on the 1 foot rule. I just wanted to ask you a question about that. So I guess the fundamental question is, what's the benefit of getting rid of it? Because it seems like if we were to, even if we're just talking about homes in flood zones, flood areas, if we were to replace a 1 foot rule with a 2 foot rule, or a rule that says, you know, 2 feet above the floodplain, because every property is different, the flood level is different, the existing home first floor elevation is different. I'm just trying to think this through a year from now. I'm not convinced that we would be avoiding all that many variances. It would just be a different sort of conversation that we would have with a different set of rules. That's the way I was just kind of game theorying this out. So, I mean, what's the benefit of changing that particular rule?
So a couple of benefits. You know, we've got this conflicting ordinances that say you have to be 2 feet above that low water mark, and we've got the requirement that says you can't build your first floor more than 1 foot above what was there previously. Mm-hmm. So we need to rectify those conflicting codes. I think we can draft this in such a way that we wouldn't see variances for new homes that are torn down and rebuilt within floodplains. We could craft this to say that low floor elevation can be no more, or needs to be 2 or 3, whatever that number is, above whatever that flood elevation is for that site. Because you're right, it's going to change. So we're not writing a specific number. It's whatever the high water elevation is for that site. They need to be 2 feet above that where they're starting. They're starting the low floor. We've had variances where sometimes it's up to 5-6 feet above the first floor elevation of the previous home, just because the water table is so high.
Okay, I don't want to belabor the point, but what if you had a situation where the first floor elevation of the existing home is 4 feet above the flood zone already? Would that mean that they would have to lower the new building 2 feet?
The first floor is only...
Are we going to say the first floor has to be 2 feet no matter what? So
that kind of sounds like a case where they don't have to build a basement, and we're changing the code so they wouldn't have to build a basement. It would be more of a slab on grade just to stay 2 feet above whatever that flood elevation is for that site.
Okay. All right, but we'll have a chance to see the language before in the next steps?
Yep,
Okay.
We could certainly do it, and that's probably a good idea. We can craft that language and bring back for next time.
Okay. I'd appreciate that. That'd be great. Thank you.
Chair, could I ask? Oh, sorry. Excuse me.
Commissioner Brewery first.
Thanks. Okay, and then regarding the building coverage and the impervious surface, so we've added the impervious surface to add some clarification of what we're talking about. It's not clear where driveways and parking lots fit in here. If the parking lot's impervious, then it's included in the numbers. If you put a parking lot in that is pervious, it's not included in the impervious numbers. Is that correct?
So this is just for single-family homes?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's called like a driveway.
Yep, so, well, yeah, whether it's a driveway and a parking area, that would be included.
Could you have a pervious driveway and not have it included in these 50% numbers?
Oh, a pervious driveway?
Yeah.
Potentially, yes.
So what keeps someone from just making their whole front yard a driveway, but it's pervious?
Well, no, actually, sorry, let me restate that. We do require driveways to be paved. You can't have a dirt drive in Edina.
But couldn't you have like a stone driveway where water goes through, and wouldn't that be considered a pervious driveway? Like
possibly,
stone
yep,
with grass in between?
I'll let Ross tackle that one.
I'll help you out, Carrie. Commissioner Bruvy, the definition for impervious surface also includes pervious driveways or pervious surfaces. And the rationale for that is those are generally engineered systems, and we want to see that they're actually designed and constructed correctly to perform that function. And they generally be doing that for another purpose based on our stormwater rules or stormwater policy. So we see the potential that builders might propose pervious driveways to meet those other stormwater rules, but they'd still be counted as against the limit for impervious surfaces.
Okay, because I do appreciate the advantage of encouraging people to have pervious driveways. So we don't want to discourage that, but it is irrelevant regarding this.
Right, yeah, we kind of saw a way that they might just try to game that as, just an obvious out.
Right.
And it wouldn't have any engineering controls.
Okay.
So that's why we included it in the definition.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. And then we are just talking about residential here, right? So when we talk about, office or other, there are different codes.
That's correct.
Okay, are we going to talk about those at another point?
We could.
Just
that'd be another work plan item.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Nemerov.
Thank you, Commissioner Agnew. Just following up on the impervious, I was wondering if you and the commissioners, Planner Teague I'm addressing, and Mr. Bittner, and the commissioners, that I know you had a side discussion, how you decided upon 50% as the number.
Carrie, would you like to speak to that?
I believe that came out of the working group with Commissioners Bennett and Strauss and Miranda. I think part of it had to, we did the study, the comparison in Morningside. We had that kind of showed where some of those smaller lots in the city landed, many of them above 50%. And the idea is to really, try to encourage green space and not paving your lot. It was based somewhat too on the survey of cities that we did. Some others higher, some lower, but 50% seemed to feel right to the group. That's kind of my recollection. If someone else wanted to weigh in.
Yes, Commissioner Bennett. I think, the important facet of our discussion was as much as we enforce this, it doesn't really address the bigger issue, which is climate change and more intense storms, whereby the rate at which that rain is falling and moving, the ground can't handle through infiltration. And so although it doesn't impact what we'd like to see in the city, it was like, hey, we need to do something, because if we have nothing, we're not really putting our foot down with anything. And I also recall Ross and Carrie, like the 50%, when we established that, it seemed like it was something that would be easy to enforce and didn't add a crazy amount of extra steps in the development or building process for someone to come through with an application. Something that, you know, if they have a survey, it's something that can be readily addressed as during the building permit process. So it seemed like we weren't adding a crazy burden or cost to someone's project, but we're at least trying to steer our city in the right direction with, you know, addressing some of the things that Sheila brought up, which was, you know, we don't want someone with a ton of hardscape. We want to promote natural ways to infiltrate, if that helps.
Oh, yeah, that's a good answer. Can I ask a follow-up question? This might be for you, Commissioner Bennett, or Mr. Bittner. When you were looking at the climate change type issues, do those studies take into account the fact that as climate change occurs, what a lot of parts of the country are seeing, and this was this was big news just last week, like for the Colorado River, how the ground loses water more quickly, and it becomes kind of like a vicious circle. And I'm just wondering if having, you know, whatever you can do to have more ground could be a benefit. You know, in other words, the less ground we have, you know, I understand it doesn't make a big impact on stormwater management, but doesn't having more ground positively impact climate change in terms of just having more ground holding moisture, especially as moisture may be leaving the ground more quickly in coming years?
I would deflect this one to Ross. I know he had more substantial data that just shows the impact isn't as much as we would like it to be, but it does help, right? It's just the degree to which it helps versus doing other things on a more macro scale it's just not comparable.
Yeah, Ross Bittner again. To answer the commission members' questions, I didn't really catch the exact question, but I got the feel for it. I think Commissioner Bennett said it right. You know, this isn't the answer to stormwater and flooding, nor is it the answer to climate change, but it's a common sense top limit that maybe a story would be better. So prior to working with the city of Edina a decade ago, I had the same conversation with my prior employer and their planning and lakes commission. They were a lake community, and they started the conversation about a limit for impervious surface based on clean water and flooding because they really love their lake. But when they really got down to it, that wasn't the reason that really swayed the argument. It was the view that you'd see from that lake if more and more of the homes went to, you know, higher and higher levels of impervious. And I think that same type of image can be taken across Edina. You know, the urban canopy that you see everywhere, the feel of the space, that doesn't grow out of the structures or the driveway or the impervious surfaces. It's the places that remain that that kind of create that cathedral effect to the urban canopy. A city that develops to higher and higher impervious levels looks a lot different and gets highly urbanized. And those are places where you have a lot stronger heat island effect. You don't have the soil moistures that can dampen out those swings in temperature. The hard surfaces soak up heat during the day and make the nights a lot hotter. You lose all the positive benefits of trees as you lose that canopy. So trees and soils, I think, are the two key things, and you can't really put your finger on what it is about them, but they definitely make the community what it is.
Okay, I mean, I would just suggest that this is an issue that we, instead of looking at how, data and thoughts from 10 years ago, that we should be trying to get whatever forecasted data, and I'm not a huge fan of forecasted data because it's like nearly impossible to even, meteorologists can't even predict whether it's going to rain 48 hours from now with, high level of certainty. But instead of 10 years ago, 10 years from now, I'd hate to, this is the kind of issue where I think we need to be very careful about always be looking in a rearview mirror. So, thank you for all your work, I guess, and, it makes a lot of sense. And I believe that Mr. Bittner's knowledge and the 3 members of the Planning Commission that looked at this in more detail have more knowledge than I do. I just sticking in the back of my mind, that thought. But thank you very much for everything all of you did.
Thank you, Commissioner Nemerov. So, Carrie, I think that this has been some really good dialogue. You have, I think, a couple of changes to make or updates to make. And then I would also ask that when drafting the actual kind of documentation that we'll be reviewing and distributing to the public, that we share a little bit of this background of why are we making these. Some of those stats you used, right, of like I don't remember exactly, 20 of the last 23 or so variances for first floor elevation would have been impacted by this. Just adding some of that color about why we're addressing these things, I think will help in setting the stage for any community members that want to contribute to that conversation.
Great suggestion. We can do that.
All right, so let's move on then to our next item, which is a sketch plan review for 7300 West Bush Lake Road.
Oh, that's not it. Sorry, bear with me a second here. I'm trying to do this without my glasses because they fog up, so I couldn't see that very well, but I think I got the right one here now. Okay, so before you is a sketch plan. This property is located, it's not working. Down in the Cahill Industrial Park. It's south of 70th Street, east of Cahill Road. It's the Minnesota-made hockey facility. So it's this site right here, 7250. There are 2 existing sheets of ice, and they also have an outdoor rink for the winter time. Property zone planned industrial district. These uses are permitted within the district. What they're proposing to do here is replace this existing outdoor rink with a 22,000 square foot training facility. Right now they lease some space up in the, I believe it's this building right here. And a lot of times they're traveling back and forth along the railroad tracks, going back and forth between the training facility and the ice rink. So they'd like to make that a little more convenient. So here's a look at the site plan. So again, here's the existing building. And this would be the new building to the south. The building itself would meet all of the setback requirements, but they would be over on building coverage. 30% is what's required in this district. Also, based on our current code, they would be short parked. So what they're looking to do is possibly a shared arrangement with the existing parking to the north. So as part of any formal application, we would do a parking study to determine whether they have enough parking for the site. So what would be required with a formal application would be a subdivision to create that new lot Within the PID district, the minimum lot size is 2 acres. The proposed lot is 1.1, so there would be a variance there. Would be a site plan review for the new building. Again, the parking stall variance and the building coverage variance. So some of the discussion points for the Planning Commission to consider. The variances itself, you can't commit to approval or denial, but general thoughts. The one that the staff has some concern about would be the building coverage. The building construction itself, so there's no detailed plans. They've indicated that they would like to build the structure similar to the existing buildings out there. The code would require that the building materials be brick and stone that faces the street. Also, with the new code requirement, 75% of the front of the building would have to be transparent, where you can see in. Again, the traffic and parking study. They would be required to fill out the sustainability questionnaire. Here's a quick look at the existing building. Again, the new building would be just to the south. And another issue for some discussion is in regard to sidewalks and bike facilities. So this is from our comprehensive plan, first the bike facility. So this is the site right here. Here's Bush Lake Road. So you can see we do have a system just to the south. And the same with the pedestrian facilities. We would have pedestrian facilities to the south. The question is, should we provide a sidewalk? There's not one planned here on the map, but it would seem to be a good idea to connect to that, to the south. There's one additional property to the south. When or if that would ever develop, the sidewalk could be added there. So just something for discussion for the commission. So with that, I will stop there, answer any questions you might have, and the applicant is here as well.
Thank you. Any questions? Commissioner Miranda.
Yeah, the 70th and Cahill plan, that talked about trying to connect 70th and Cahill, excuse me, across the, with a bike lane or, bikeway or something, and pedestrian way across the railroad tracks to that area. Is this something that we could discuss at this point, or?
Like using the railroad right of way, or?
Well, seeing if the proposal could incorporate something like that, if as part of a plan to get something across there.
Yeah, there's some potential in that. So I think you're thinking. Whoop. So the site does extend all the way up to here, and this is a parking area. Getting across the tracks, of course, is a challenge dealing with the railroads, right. But that does move into the 70th and Cahill little node up here, for sure.
Right, be a shortcut through there, so, okay.
I have one question, just logistics. Does the rink count in the building coverage today, that outdoor rink, in building coverage calculation?
I don't believe it would. It's really a temporary structure, although generally permanent it is there year-round. But they probably, just eyeing the site, probably comply with the building coverage because the site is so large today. It's the dividing it off to the south where the building takes up all of this site. We could run that calculation, though, for the overall review.
Yeah, and I'd also be interested in how the size of the rink compares to the size of the new building, but I can ask that question to the applicant, too. Okay, yes, Commissioner Strauss.
Carrie, obviously that's a significant shortage of parking if that will become, is that when you would say at the point they would do a parking study, would that typically be where, parking agreements or easements or rights, all that would be negotiated? Because I don't think it's a question of having enough parking in the area. It's just, whether it's assigned to one property or another. But that could be addressed.
It
and
most
as a
certainly.
result of that parking study and
Yes.
what you would need. Okay.
Yeah, because they're creating that new lot, if this is truly to become a shared arrangement, just to protect that lot to the south. Let's say the parking study comes back and it works out where they can share, we would want to draft up legal documents that provides that south lot to be able to access the north lot, those parking stalls.
Yeah, something that would have some sort of long-term or assurance to. Thank you.
This is Joanne. I just had a quick question for Carrie. It was a follow-up with a question that was just asked. Yeah, I think it would be helpful if you could provide illustration of how it went from 30% to 45% coverage, and also include, you know, the temporary skating rink. It just seems like that should be kind of considered impervious now too, but that would be helpful for me to see. Or if you could request that of the applicant.
Yep, we can do that.
Commissioner Nemerov?
Oh, thank you, Commissioner Chair Agnew. The only thing, I think the comments are good. I would be interested in seeing how the parking works. That's subject to the parking study. But if the applicant can make it work and show that it works, that sounds good. I mean, I assume that, you know, getting hockey equipment and training stuff to a facility is going to require people driving. So that'll be an interesting thing to see. If you can show that it makes it work, that sounds great. Without it impacting any neighbors, but the location of this, I think, should help. But that'll be an interesting thing. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Well, let's have the Commissioner Miranda.
Commissioner Bennett, too.
All right, we'll start with Commissioner Miranda.
All right. Just additional question. Why is the lot being split? Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, probably a question for the applicant.
Okay.
Commissioner Bennett?
Yeah, Carrie, could you speak to the history of the code changing, how it specifically affects PID, so the industrial set? I guess I'm struggling to understand why, you know, an industrial building would need 75% transparency on its front-facing wall. That just doesn't seem to jive with typical industrial uses, but maybe you could explain that better to me. Thanks.
Yeah, so that's a good question. The ordinance was amended to include this district. I think the thinking was that this district is going to transform also. But it is, you know, I don't believe there are too many buildings in that district today that would conform with that 75%. Whether that 75% number is right, I know developers that I've talked to who are looking to develop, you know, within the greater Southdale district sometimes have issue with that 75%. Some have made it work, but it is something for discussion. Do we really want to have that 75% requirement in the industrial park? But the code was amended to include it.
Thanks. Yeah, that just seems to just not jive with either what's planned here, which seems like a good use that's continued, and other similar uses. So that was the only thing I'd say I'm a little more agreeable towards. Thanks.
All right. Well, I'd love to invite the applicant to make a proposal or show what your plans are today. Hello.
I am Reiner's Architects. Thank you. I'm we are in Eden Prairie, Minnesota. I'm representing Mr. Bernie McBain. He's the owner of Invicta and Minnesota Made Hockey. So it's really a simple sketch plan review and conversation with Carrie. We have two conditions when we first laid down this plan. One immediately hit us was the lot size and the 2-acre minimum, which we can't achieve. And then the parking ratio based on 1 per 200 square feet for this facility is, if it was an industrial building,
with employees, it would make sense, but this is a training center. Kids are working out, 30 to 40 kids dropped off by parents. And we have the Minnesota-made Ice Center next door, which has a tremendous amount of parking. The question, Commissioner Miranda, regarding the lot split, everything has to do with Mr. McBain would like to build this facility separately financed from the existing facility. So by creating the lot split, he can create a separate entity to finance this project. So that's the main reason. Secondly, the existing building has a shed roof that leans to, it's an old tennis club for those of you that are old enough to remember that, and the roof slopes to the south. So if we were to build an addition onto this building, we have some technical issues, and it's a steel frame building with metal siding versus a structure that we plan to build out of concrete and steel. So it's a couple of technical issues, which is why we created the lot split, but mostly it's a financial situation. Should the variance not be something you're willing to help us with, we would go the other route and see what we could do, and that's up to Mr. McBain. So with commentary about the bike extension and sidewalk, again, this arena has been there a long time, and it's specific to hockey. Kind of hard to schlep your hockey bag and equipment on a bike. Most of the kids don't walk with their equipment from parts. This is largely industrial area, so I would say that's probably not something, unless it's part of the master plan and we have to look at it. But again, there's a piece of property between that bike lane that you do have and this property being at the end. So we'll comply with all the other situations regarding code. We just wanted to get a litmus test from all of you tonight to see if you'd be supportive of this project. We'll figure out, as far as the lot coverage, a reduction to get us closer to the 30%. We'll study that. We haven't really even studied the stormwater management. It's just merely a footprint we've placed down on this property. So just trying to get a feel for you if you'd be supportive, and any comments that you might have to help us make this. Minnesota-made hockey's been around for how many years?
Since 93, and the rink has been there since 2006.
Okay, so since 2006, and I don't know if you've had the opportunity to be there, but it's a vibrant and very important piece to the hockey community in all of the metro area. And weekends are busy, as you can imagine, with tournaments. And so the parking issue, not only do we have enough parking on this whole site, but Bernie has a great relationship with neighbors, and when time comes to overpark, or if there's a conflict, we would have arrangements with neighboring properties as well. Would you like to say anything? Okay, all right.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah.
So I open it up to the commission. Any feedback or questions? Commissioner Berube.
Could I ask a question of Planner Teague?
Yes, you may.
Planner Teague. So I like the idea of having less parking, because most of the time you don't need it. But it sounds like there are occasions, like if there's a tournament, there's a lot of parents there, spectators, you're going to need a lot of parking. So as a planning department, when you're talking about, does this make sense? So you hear the applicant say, we can, we've got a great relationship, we can work with the neighbors, we'll make it work, right? So that all sounds good, but how, as a planning department, how can we ensure that that isn't just wishful thinking?
I believe he's referring to the current conditions in the parking just for what's there. Mm-hmm. But we want to make sure that it's going to work together.
Right, for the sketch plan, because
right.
We don't want them to build something thinking, well, they've got great relationships with the neighbors, but we all have neighbors that sometimes the relationships don't go as well as you think they're going to go.
Right.
So how can we ensure that the parking is going to be there for the future?
Yep. And
like, how do we hold them accountable for that?
Yep. So that's where we rely on the parking study. And I would imagine, they're not going to have, potentially, we could write into any kind of approval hours of operation for the fitness facility. I would imagine they're probably not going to have a lot of people in that facility while there's a tournament going on. Perhaps that could be written into to any conditions. Maybe the facility gets used for people who are already there at the hockey rink, and it's kind of a shared synergy there.
Can I add to my commentary? I didn't really describe to you the nature of this particular building.
Sure.
It would not be an ice rink. This would be an indoor training facility with a turfed area, weightlifting, hockey conditioning, hockey stick handling, which it replaces the facility that's currently on Amundsen Avenue. So this is an adjunct separate entity to the ice rink. So in a tournament event, you're right, the people that are already there could go over and work out and utilize the extra space. So it's a complementary function. Okay.
Chair Agnew, could I ask a further question of Planner Teague?
Yes, please, Commissioner Nemerov.
So thank you. A lot of question about parking. Just one, and I think the logic underlying the variance for the parking is the use. Obviously, if tenants come and go in buildings, or owners of buildings come and go, and different uses occur in those buildings in the future. Is there a way, and is it? I don't even know if it's reasonable or not. I'm just asking if there's a way to tie the parking variance to the use. And if another use came in, then they would have to figure out, they'd have to come back and figure out parking.
Yes, most certainly. I think that's a good idea, and we should consider future uses, especially if there's a shared parking arrangement with that property to the north. So, yeah, we would want to build in some protections should the uses change over time.
Thank you. Thanks for answering.
Commissioner Alkire.
I think this is a question for staff. 30% building coverage is the standard, and just eyeballing the aerial photographs, it seems like it's not always applied. If you look at the building just to the west, I can't see where the lot lines are in that picture, but it seems like it's more than 30%. I mean, have we been consistent over time with 30% in an industrial park? It seems rather small, just on first blush.
Yeah, as far as I know, we haven't had a lot of new buildings built in the industrial park in my time, so we haven't had variances to the 30%. But not to say that there aren't nonconformities out there. I would be probably safe in saying there are some.
Yeah. Because if you're just thinking this through, if you're in an industrial park and you don't need a lot of parking, then what else are you going to do with the space, I guess?
It's a good point. Is 30% really appropriate for building coverage in an industrial park?
Okay, thanks.
Oftentimes, the rest of it is taken up with the parking lot.
Right.
Commissioner Berube?
So I guess where I have a little bit of difficulty providing feedback on this is, we're talking about this as an industrial park, and this seems like a great use. But I don't know if that's our vision for the future for this area. And so for today, it's great. And I would just recommend, you do what you can for, landscaping and trying to make it a little less boxy. But truthfully, in an industrial park, it's serving a purpose, right? So maybe we don't really care. But, in 10 years, this is going to be an industrial park, or there's been conversations about, being a little bit more creative with this area. And so that's why it's really difficult to provide feedback, because if we're providing feedback for what the area is today, this would be fine. But if we're providing feedback for what we might want it to be 10 years from now, we have a lot more to say, and it probably doesn't look like a big box where the whole block is covered and there's no landscaping.
Yeah,
So-
our charge is to review this based on what the codes say today.
Yeah. So I guess it's kind of hard to argue with. I would add some landscaping.
Commissioner Miranda.
Yeah, I guess I'm not really, as you might guess, I'm not really concerned about the parking as an issue. It's not anywhere near a single-family home or anything, so I don't know who it would interfere with. And the streets are plenty wide for parking on the street, right? It's an industrial area. I don't think it really matters. But I do think that, and the building coverage, yeah, I don't think that, I'm not really overly concerned with that. But I do think this is a rare opportunity to connect areas. So this whole industrial area has a lot of cul-de-sacs. And, you know, we talk about the bike and pedestrian plan to, you know, connect around the city, but I think we need to connect all these little islands, basically, in this area. And being where that parking lot goes up to the north and west, and I know railroads are notoriously horrible to work with, but I almost think the city needs some sort of plan long-term to connect these areas. And I think this is a golden opportunity to connect to the 70th and Cahill area. So I guess that's really my main concern with this.
Commissioner Strauss.
Yeah, just maybe further expand on Commissioner Miranda's. I think the applicant made a comment about sidewalks, bike lanes, perhaps not being necessary to serve this project. But there are this area is going to be studied. The 70th and Cahill has been, and one of the things that they remarked about was the barriers from 70th and Cahill to the other part of the industrial park and how to affect interconnections. And I think that may be an important group to engage with, is that kind of overall transit, sidewalk, biking plans, all that kind of stuff. That is going to become important. And as far as the use of the site, I think it seems like it's a natural use. It's just you're expanding what's there. So I don't see any problems, even with the lot coverage. But how this connects with the larger industrial park and the 70th and Cahill should be part of the discussion.
All right, I think everyone here has had the opportunity to speak, so I will directly ask Commissioner Olson, do you have any feedback?
Thank you. Well, I just agree with what Commissioner Strauss said and Commissioner Miranda. I just, even though they might not, whoever's using this facility might not be coming by bike or on the sidewalk, I think we absolutely have to take advantage of any opportunity to connect to that system that's been planned, and also to look at how it fits in the whole area. So I, again, agree that they should look at providing those connectivity points.
Thank you. Commissioner Bennett?
Yeah, I have no issues with the building coverage for all the reasons mentioned. It's just an expanded use in an industrial area, and that's what I was bringing up, the transparency part too. If that is a variance, I'd support that too. But I think it was hit on the head well, and the greater connection to the rest of the industrial park, whether that even turns into other uses over time, like currently we just hear from other neighbors that do like to get from point A to point B that have to go through a massively circuitous route, that if we can get creative and get some sort of connection, and maybe there's, a spot for like an easement on one of the property lines, to just allow for that future connection and the city hash it out with the railroad or something. I think that should be explored. Thanks.
Commissioner Nemerov, anything additional to add? No? Okay. So, I would echo a lot of things that I've heard from my fellow commissioners tonight. I think, and I'm going to repeat it just to put a fine point on it. I think that biking and sidewalks is really important for the placement in this community. And so I understand that it might not necessarily be the kids that are coming with all of their hockey gear or anything like that, but it is an important component to the broader community. And I would expect that some of those kids, maybe when they're not going to play hockey, would be using this area and want to make it accessible. I also want to react to Commissioner Berrubi's questions about parking. And I think that it's always interesting when we talk about parking, but especially so when the plans around parking go to peak usage. So hearing that, on some of the busier days when there are tournaments or whatever, there might be some spillover parking or needing to accommodate that. I'm nervous because I don't think that we should create parking requirements for the rare peak uses. I wouldn't want to, for example, require Target to build out enough parking to staff for Black Friday when the 364 days of the year they don't need that. And speaking from myself personally, that's a lens that I use when I'm thinking about parking. And then I guess echoing to the timing, we are right now considering our entire, pulling together a plan for the Cahill industrial area. And so consider that. I don't know what the timing is for this project or when you would be coming back for the variance directly. But those plans we're starting to kick off a lot of that dialogue. And so, a year from now, we might have a lot better insight or direction to some of those things we were saying of what is the ideal kind of future for this area. And so just know that a lot of those conversations are happening now, and more will continue to come of that over the next year. All right. Anyone else want to add to that? All right. Well, thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you when you come back. All right. Next, the last report and recommendation is for Resolution B2127.
Do you want to start it off, or?
Go ahead.
Great. Good evening, everyone. My name is Bill Neundorf. I'm the city's economic development manager, and I'm here this evening to present a resolution in regard to the Southdale 2 Tax Increment Finance District. From time to time, we present these types of requests to you. We usually get a lot of confused questions about why are we talking about public finance here. This is one step in a very long process where we check in with a variety of different groups as we prepare to make a recommendation to our city council. So recently, I think about a month or two ago, you heard a similar request for the project. It's a senior housing project, 4040 West 70th. So the request tonight is similar to that, but for a different area. In your packet, there was a staff memo that included some background as well as a staff analysis and then a recommendation. I'll walk through that briefly tonight, and I'll keep my remarks in a couple different categories. First of all, I'll provide some background. This district dates back 10 years ago. So I know a lot of the commissioners were not on the commission 10 years ago, so I'll bring you up to speed a little bit about what happened then. And then I'll summarize the proposal that's in front of us these days, and then give a quick overview of the findings and then a staff recommendation. In essence, in 2011, the city created the Southdale 2 Tax Increment Financing District. That's the district. It encompasses the mall and the surrounding properties. As part of the process that I mentioned, in March of 2012, we met with this group, And one of the steps, one of the key questions we ask this particular body is whether or not the plan for redevelopment, the plan for progress, conforms to the general plans of the city. So the comprehensive plan, small area plans, those types of matters. And there's a concise statement that that the state likes to use. So in the past, we've talked about amending it or kind of wordsmithing it. Our city attorney reminds us that the words that are in the resolution are there for a reason. That's what the state legislature likes to see, so that's what you'll see this evening. But in essence, the plan that was approved back in 2012 called for the reinvestment in the shopping mall with the intention of stabilizing the shopping center so that it could get back on its feet, but also to incentivize the surrounding property owners to make an investment. Back in that area, in that era, we were just coming out of the Great Recession. There was a lot of properties that were tired. There was a lot of property owners that were sitting on the sidelines. No one wanted to make the first move as far as reinvesting in the community. And the city council in those days thought that having the shopping center make a big investment would be the best first move. And that is indeed what has happened. As you know, there's been several projects that have happened right in the mall, around the mall, and elsewhere throughout that whole district. So from time to time, after we created a TIF district, there's changes, there's amendments and modifications, similar to how earlier this evening you considered a potential ordinance change, a modification of an ordinance. Same thing for a TIF plan. When you modify it, you have to go through the same process as if you're creating it from scratch, which means we make stops to the Planning Commission, to the school boards, to the county, to the Housing and Redevelopment Authority, to the City Council, and then a public hearing, and then back to the City Council. So it's a bit of a process. The modification we have in front of you tonight is very simple. There were recent changes in the state tax bill this year that required and allowed the recalculation of some of the budgeting in that TIF plan, and that's what we're doing here tonight is updating the budget in that plan. And that's it. We're not changing the boundaries. We're not extending it. We're not changing that long-term vision, but simply modifying the budget. So as I was preparing the staff report, I kept thinking, boy, this seems like a silly process, a silly step to go through, but it is one of those state-mandated steps that we proceed with. So the action that we're requesting this evening is for the Planning Commission to make a ruling by resolution, by the written resolution, that these changes to the TIF plan do not change its overall compliance with our comprehensive plan. And as you find in writing, and as I just mentioned, the only thing we're changing are a couple lines in the budget. There's no change in the district, in the plan, in the outcomes. But just to be on the safe side, in the report, I did go through some staff findings, because the one thing that has changed in recent years is we now have a new comprehensive plan. When we first created this district, we evaluated it based on the 2008 comprehensive plan. So in the staff report, I went through a summary of findings, making reference to specific sections in the old plan, the 2008 comprehensive plan, as well as similar line items in the new comprehensive plan. I also referenced some sections from the Greater Southdale plan. And that's what we use as support to give you confidence that this new plan with an updated budget section still complies with the overall plan of the city. So with that in mind, we did draft Resolution B2127, and that does state and affirm some of the comments that I just made. It sets the stage of why we're doing the resolution, and then it has that required statement about how generally the changes in the TIF plan do not change the fact that it complies with the overall comprehensive plan. So in a nutshell, that's what the resolution is about. I'm happy to answer any questions, and thank you for your time, Commissioner.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Neuendorf. Any questions? Yes, Commissioner Alkire.
Thanks for that presentation. There's something in the materials about Southdale 2 decertifying December 31, 21. Could you say I don't know, what does that mean? What is the significance of that?
Yeah, sure. So when the city council chooses to use tax increment financing, you create a district that has a defined set of boundaries, geographic boundaries, and a defined time period. There's a start date and an end date. For the Southdale 2 district, we chose to use what was called an economic development district, which has an 8-year lifespan, and that comes to a close at the end of this year. So that means that the district will basically be dissolved, and then that's when the good stuff happens. From a taxing agency perspective, all of the new tax base that is built up over the 10 years will then be released to the school districts, to the city council, or to the city's budget, the county's budget, watershed district, and all those taxing agencies. So that date is set in stone. It will terminate at the end of this year.
Any other questions? If you're joining remotely, please interject with any questions.
No questions from me.
All right. So I think what is being asked of us tonight would be to approve this resolution. So do we have a motion on the table?
I move that we approve the resolution B-21-27, finding that the Southdale 2 tax increment financing plan modifications are consistent with the comprehensive plan as stated in the staff memo.
I'll second.
Can I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Miranda?
Aye.
Commissioner Berube?
Aye.
Commissioner Alkire?
Aye.
Commissioner Nemerov?
Aye.
Commissioner Strauss?
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
And Chair Agnew.
Aye. So the resolution has been approved. Thank you. Next on the agenda is chair and member comments. Any comments from anyone? Nothing from Commissioner Miranda. All right.
I have a few, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
If anyone else wants to go. Thanks. I do have a few. First of all, I want to thank Commissioner Agnew. It's been a pleasure to attend this meeting as you've been chairing it. You're doing a great job. I appreciate your taking it tonight while I was being remote. Also, I never noticed this before, but I ran my stopwatch a couple times. Well, I have several different screens going. I have the screen that we dial into. I have the YouTube presentation, and then I have a screen with the matters. And I got to approximately, I don't have a scientific thing going, but it's approximately 45 seconds difference between the screen that I see, which is our live discussion, and 45 seconds when it comes on to the other program. And it psyched me out a couple times, but I finally figured it out. A couple of things I wanted to talk about beyond that. First of all, I don't know if, I assume that most or all of you have seen The Princess Bride. And so I'm just going to go ahead without hearing yays or nays. But, you know, as most of you probably know, there's a scene in The Princess Bride where Wesley, or Dread Pirate Roberts, as he's known at the time, as he used to be known as Farm Boy, he finally got through all of the physical challenges, Andre the Giant and Inigo Montoya and everything else, and he's meeting with Vizzini in there, and he gives him a challenge, and he says, you know, if one of these cups is going to have poison, and one won't. And if you pick the one that doesn't and you live, you win, and I'll die. And they go through this thing. And Vizzini is this know-it-all. I'm sure most of you or all of you know this. And Vizzini, he thinks he knows everything. And he drinks, and Dread Pirate Roberts, Wesley drinks, and Vizzini starts going on. He's certain that he won and that that Wesley is going to die. But then all of a sudden, in the middle of a speech, Vizzini keels over because Dread Pirate Roberts or Wesley or Farm Boy, essentially what he'd been doing is the cups were filled with poison, and over the last 2 years while he was a pirate, for the last several years, he'd been essentially vaccinating himself to that poison. And it surprises me that right now, maybe 25 to 30% of people still would rather be Vizzini. And, we have people that are going to the emergent, people are in this country are going to the emergency room or taking their kids to the emergency room, and the doctor says, I suspect you have COVID. And the people are saying, don't test. I don't want to know. I don't believe that it's COVID. And so, it's kind of a big deal. I'm amazed. And, for me, it's almost 20 years to the day since I was in the ICU after having I'm told once in a lifetime respiratory infection that became pneumonia and might have become meningitis, but they said, look, there's no reason for us to test you, and it's a really painful test. We're going to treat you the same. But I was in the ICU, so I take it was a once in a lifetime thing, so I'm probably not going to get that again. But I take this stuff seriously, and so we're coming. There's a lot of things going on. We've had this new uptick, and so I'm trying to be very picky on what I do in those rooms, and maybe I might be being over careful. So that's why I'm remote tonight. I've been in conversations with city management, with Carrie about various things, so I may need to, unless certain things happen, and I'll have to make a decision about whether, my understanding is this is as Chair Agnew mentioned at the outset of the meeting, that this currently is slated to be the end of August is the end of when you can attend meetings remotely. So I'll have to make a decision before the next meeting about whether I will, unless something changes, whether I will continue or not continue. So I want to, in case I decide not to continue, I want to thank everyone, staff and the Planning Commission for letting me serve on the Planning Commission. And, it was a pleasure to work. I took a lot of pride in the work I did, particularly on the comprehensive plan. I'm kind of surprised by some of the dialogue that is still going on about certain things, but I don't want to dive too deep into any of those weeds. But I wanted to leave, if this is my last meeting, I wanted to leave you with a very brief poem that I think is applicable to this week, things going on this week, but it also has eternal, it has an eternal message. It's written coincidentally by a man named Howard Nemerov, who he wrote it in 1987. He became United States Poet Laureate just a couple of years later. And so it's very brief. I'll read it to you. It's called Ultima Ratio Regum. It's the title is a play on words for a Latin phrase, Ultima Ratio Regum, which you can look up on your own if you choose. But here is a very brief 8-line poem. And then otherwise, I'll thank you. So the reason we do not learn from history is because we are not the people who learned last time. Because we are not the same people as them that fed our sons and honored to Vietnam and dropped the burning money on their trees. We know that we know better than they knew, and history will not blame us if once again the light at the end of the tunnel is the train. And if anyone wants to talk about that offline, reach out or be happy to talk to you. But otherwise, I may be back, but I may not. And if I'm not, thank you. And, I think you guys are doing a great job. So thank you.
Thanks, Ian. And on that note, no more rhyming, and I mean it.
Thank you, Commissioner Nemerov. Anyone else tonight? Okay. Staff comments. Looking at you, Carrie.
Just quick update from the last city council meeting. The council did take action on the Pentagon South project. The Planning Commission expressed some concerns about that north lot line and screening, you know, the part that faced that internal street. The applicant did provide a lot more detail of what that was going to look like. So I think that may have assisted, although some may say it kind of still showed how close it is to the street there. But nonetheless, the city council did approve the project. And that was the only item that they took action on. So that's it for me.
All right, thank you. That concludes our agenda.
Move to adjourn.
I second.
A roll call, please.
Commissioner Miranda?
Aye.
Commissioner Berube?
Aye.
Commissioner Alkire?
Aye.
Commissioner Nemerov?
Aye.
Commissioner Strauss?
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Chair Agnew?
Aye. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. You too.
Oh, that was quick.
Yep.
Are you here in the morning?
No, that'll be good.
Okay, all right. See you later.